Wait. So what does Herman say? Everybody's got to work. And we're not talking about slave labor. No, Germans. All of them, all the men and all the women. They all have to do the same. What about their other jobs? Doesn't matter. Herman says they all have to work. Okay, yeah, well, times change. All right, see ya. April 2nd, 1943. There are many ways to try to find out your enemy's plans for the war. And this week, the British learn about a German plan for the future from simple eavesdropping. And what do they learn? This week, they learn about rockets. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, for the second week in a row, there was a failed attempt on Adolf Hitler's life. The Americans and British were hitting the Axis forces in Tunisia from two sides, though not conclusively. The Chindits were retreating from Burma, the Japanese Navy from the North Pacific, the Germans from near Smolensk, and there was a whole lot of mud everywhere. Albert Speer has given Hitler the plans for an enormous missile silo made of reinforced concrete to be located on the Channel coast and from where London can be easily bombarded. Hitler approves the plans March 29th. The secret German rocket program is progressing, albeit slowly. But there's also this. Last week on the 23rd, Axis generals Cruel and von Thoma, both captured in North Africa and currently guests of the Allies in a prison near London, had a conversation. British intelligence is listening to their conversations. Von Thoma told Cruel that since they're near London, and since he doesn't hear huge explosions, there must be a delay of some sort in the rocket program. No progress whatsoever can have been made in this rocket business. And then he described a trip he'd made to an experimental rocket base and went on. The major was full of hope. He said, "Wait till next year and the fun will start." Thoma also says there's no limit to the rocket's range. So what I'm saying now is that the secret German rocket program is progressing, only it's no longer a secret. As for the Allied bombing of Germany, by April 2nd, the daily and nightly Allied bombing runs have reached the point where Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring issues a decree that makes air raid patrol duty mandatory for all able-bodied men and women. That's in the European skies. How about at sea? For the month of March, the Allies lose 120 ships for 693,400 tons. U-boats sink 627,000 of that, and of 108 ships falling to U-boats, 72 are from North Atlantic convoys. The Germans lose 15 U-boats, but only 6 in convoy battles. After the convoy disasters we saw 2 weeks ago, the support groups that were used for Operation Torch last November are finally back in the North Atlantic though, and by the end of March there are 5 such groups available which have 3 escort carriers, though a 4th is lost to an explosion on the 27th. It's an internal explosion and we don't really know just how it happens, but 379 of 529 crew perish when the Dasher sinks. As for the Pacific, after the major loss of the Battle of the Bismarck Sea a month ago, the Japanese started working out a new defensive strategy, the 3rd phase of the Greater East Asia War. But there have been real differences of opinion. The Army and the General Staff want to focus on relieving New Guinea. They think that the eastern part of it and the Solomon Islands and the Bismarck Archipelago are too far from home for an effective campaign. The Navy, however, thinks the Solomons are the key, pointing out they have more air bases there than they do on New Guinea, and the loss of Bougainville, should that happen, would then threaten Rabaul and the naval base of the combined fleet at Truk. The Army, at least for the time being, gets its way. And last week on the 25th, a new agreement was sent to 8th Area Army Commander Hitoshi Imamura at Rabaul and Combined Fleet Commander Isoroku Yamamoto at Truk. It calls for Allied air power to be destroyed, and then reinforcements will go to Leh and Salamaua. It is the Navy that gets the job of clearing the skies, since they have the most fighters and bombers. So Yamamoto and his staff put together Operation Aigo, which will strip his carriers and Truk of planes in order to launch a series of massive airstrikes against the Allied bases in the Solomons and on New Guinea. The Allies are very much active in the field this week in Tunisia. The British armored advance starts just after midnight as the week begins. During the night, the British armored advance gathered pace, driving down the road to El Hama. Von Liebenstein now ordered all units on his left to disengage and fall back to a position southwest of El Hama. The retreat became a race with the British to see who could move the fastest, with both sides moving parallel to each other and often becoming mixed together in the confusion. The Germans won the race and managed to get enough force in place to man an anti-tank screen across the approaches to El Hama, which stopped 1st Armored Division in its tracks. Dawn on the 27th actually finds a bunch of British tanks pretty exposed. That day, they try to break through but fail, and it seems Operation Supercharge 2 is running out of gas. So the armor is ordered to hold defensive positions while the New Zealand infantry comes up to join them. This happens that night, but more time is lost deciding whether they should attack El Hama or bypass it and move on Gabes straight off. Events of the day render this moot though, since Axis Commander Giovanni Messe has by then withdrawn almost all of his forces from the Mareth line and through Gabes. Even his 2 scattered panzer divisions have been able to regroup, and on the 28th they protect El Hama until that night they get word that all of the southern forces have also withdrawn. Then they pull back to Wadi Akarit. So the end of the fight for the Mareth line turns out to be a real anticlimax. The Allies do not attack the panzers the 28th, since they will now conserve all their strength for an upcoming attack on Wadi Akarit. But there's this. The Battle of Mareth had been won, but its winning had not been convincing. It took much longer to complete than was planned, and was achieved by force of numbers rather than by tactical brilliance. If the main attack had been strong and forced its way into the enemy defenses, Messe's armor would have been committed in the south, which would have allowed Freiburg's New Zealanders to exploit their left hook in the north by attacking fixed defenses with just 1 brigade. When so much infantry and armor was available to him, Montgomery had made a severe miscalculation. Well, okay, but to be fair to him, he did then change the main attack to be the intended flanking attack, and that is what actually won the battle. But that change did take time to effect, and during that time, Messe could not only move his forces around, he could withdraw them completely without much opposition, so it is a bit of a hollow victory, really. I mean, 3 Axis divisions had stopped 3 British corps for the better part of 2 weeks. So the Italians have been digging into their new positions, which are a shorter line of just 24 or so kilometers. This wadi is deeper and wider than Wadi Zigzag near the coast, but it flattens as it rises. They have, though, dug an anti-tank ditch and laid minefields. So now they've got the German 164th Light Division and the Italian Sahara Group on their right, the Pistoia, Sepia, and Trieste divisions in the center, and the Giovanni Fascisti and part of the German 90th Light near the sea and the main coastal highway. The rest of 90th Light and the 15th Panzer Division are to the rear, and the 10th and 21st Panzer Divisions and the Italian Centauro Division are to the northwest, blocking the Americans. There are problems with this defense system. First of all, if Patton's Americans break through, they can flank the Axis from the rear. But this position in general has not much depth. Should 8th Army cross the Wadi and reach the coastal plain, they can spread out and really use their numerical advantage. On the 30th, Montgomery gets the suggestion that an immediate lightning attack could take them right through enemy lines if he's willing to accept heavy casualties. He declines. He thinks that if the enemy is threatened by both his army and U.S. Second Corps, then he will again withdraw. This is actually the Axis plan, to withdraw all the way to Enfidaville if they are seriously threatened here. But Monty does put together an attack plan. 1st Armored Division will make a feint in the hills to the west, and the 50th, 51st, and Indian 4th Divisions will attack up the middle, with 10th Corps bringing up 500 tanks once a gap is broken. The attack is scheduled for April 6th. As for those American forces to the northwest, we saw the victory by the southern prong of U.S. Second Corps' attack over the 10th Panzers last week. But the northern prong was also fighting. They took Senate Station the 21st, and the 22nd arrived in force at Maknassi, which had been abandoned. This is Orlando Ward's 1st Armored Division. His orders are to remain there except for some raiding operations. And not knowing what sort of force is on the ridge 10 kilometers east of the town, he's unwilling to take heavy casualties to seize that high ground. But that night he gets orders to take it. But during the whole day, the Axis have reinforced it. So over the next few days, Ward makes no progress, and the stalemate east of Magnassi is a fact. Ward is actually removed from command April 1st, and Ernie Harmon will take over. The southern prong of Patton's 2nd Corps is in action again this week. They got orders at the end of last week for the 9th and 1st Divisions to cut a hole in the Axis defenses southeast of El Getar for the armor to make a thrust down the highway towards Gabes and harass Messe from behind. If any god were watching from their Jebel Iris and saw disaster brewing, they declined to intervene on behalf of the mortals in olive drab. Patton's plan was badly flawed. German infiltrators have occupied the highest ground on Jebel Berda. They could see virtually every American movement. Instead of first securing this pinnacle and the connecting ridges, the Americans chose to skirt them in a hell-for-leather attack by 2 infantry divisions on either side of Highway 15. Allied intelligence says the area is lightly held by the enemy. This is not true. It also says the ground is mostly flat. This is not true. It is box canyons and ridges where the 10th Panzer Division and Centauro Division wait, both rested and regrouped after last week's losses, with an excellent command post on Hill 369 that dominates all traffic down the highway. The 9th Division attack goes off the 28th, and it is a disaster for the Americans with huge casualties. Attacks on the 30th mistake Hill 290 for Hill 369 and are savaged by enemy machine guns. The 1st Division attacks the other side of the highway are no more successful. Army Group Commander Harold Alexander on the 29th changes the American attack plan to an armored wedge, that is to plow through the enemy down the highway. But that sort of attack, both the 30th and 31st, goes nowhere in the face of the enemy that has been reinforced by grenadiers from the Afrika Korps and the tanks of the 21st Panzer Division. Alexander then changes tack again the 1st and goes back to the plan for the infantry to open a path for the armor. But the week comes to its end without any advance made. There are also attacks by the American 34th Division towards Fonduc, the 27th and 28th. These both fail, and fail fairly heavily. Belatedly, Alexander realized that only a much bigger force could crack the Fonduc gap. Caution and conventionality, jabs, short hooks, and frontal assaults had characterized the 6th week of his generalship in Tunisia. Nearly 90,000 Americans had been used to peck at the eastern dorsal in 3 different spots, while a comparable force of Anderson's 1st Army mostly sat on its haunches for the past month. Just as Colonel Lang had concluded that a more forceful American attack at Magnassi Heights would have unhinged the defenders there, so senior Axis commanders came to believe the African campaign could have ended a month sooner had Alexander struck a quicker, bolder blow at Fonduc. Well, he is going to try to make up for that. The Fonduc force is to be more than tripled, as 34th Division joins British 9th Corps and the French forces. They will try in a few days to open up the gap and allow the British 6th Armored Division to hit the coastal plain towards Kairouan, ideally intercepting Messe's retreating force. Those are future attacks, but the Allies are ending some current attacks this week in the Soviet Union. The attacks by the Leningrad and Volkhov fronts that went on all last week and continue all this week are both called off today on the 2nd. The Germans have reinforced in both regions, and the fighting over the past 2 weeks has been heavy but fruitless. Relative calm descended over the front in the Leningrad region, just as it did in the Staraya Russa region to the south. In the wake of this calm, Operation Polar Star would become only a memory worthy of nothing more than an occasional footnote in subsequent Soviet military histories. The reality is that they hardly dented the German defenses south of Leningrad, and the spring thaws have begun, and the terrain is mud, mud, and more mud. But the bigger reality is that Operation Polar Star, which gave meaning and context to the offensive at Leningrad, had failed. In addition, even Stavka could no longer permit the immense waste of manpower in continued futile operations in the region. Despite its failure, however, the offensive contributed significantly to the Stavka's overall efforts by ending once and for all any German thoughts about capturing Leningrad. And as that offensive ends, so does this week of the war, with the Axis consolidating in Tunisia as the Allies prepare more attacks, both Axis and Allied commands making offensive plans for the Pacific, and the fighting coming to an end in the Soviet Union. Though I'll add here that a new Red Army offensive will kick off next week in the Kuban. And what's the story with the rockets? Rockets, huh? Yeah. So futuristic here in 1943, huh? Robert Goddard published A Method of Reaching Extreme Altitudes in 1920. And he really pioneered modern rocketry in 1926 when he attached a de Laval tube to a high-pressure combustion chamber. This takes the hot gases from where the fuel is burned and turns them into a tightly directed jet of gas, which at least doubles the thrust and can increase the efficiency of an engine by several exponential orders. Using liquid propellant also weighs a lot less than gunpowder and makes rockets way more effective. So, the Germans have a rocket program to build missiles to rain down on London. They have experimented with rockets in Germany since the 20s, actually, and Werner von Braun has used Goddard's work in building the aggregate series of rockets. Rocket bombing London sure sounds more effective than sending manned planes. But will it be? If they finish their program? And now that the British know they have such a program, will that make a difference? Can they sabotage it? Can they defend against rockets? So many questions. And as for answers, only time will tell. If you'd like to learn more about what the Allies are doing in terms of superweapon projects, you can click here for a special we did last year on the beginning of the Manhattan Project, right here. And these are all of the newly commissioned officers in the Time Ghost Army. And our Time Ghost Army member of the week is Asad bin Sayed. We want this history to be educational, objective, and accessible to millions of people around the world for free. So join us on this mission by joining the Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. And do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.